All right, so hello everybody. So today is part two, where we're going to take a deeper dive into the social business canvas model. So we looked at a few segments in detail a couple of weeks ago, and now we're going to finish that up. And then in January, we'll do another webinar where we look at building out the social business canvas model into a full-fledged business plan. But before we begin, we'll do a land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that we are on Epektowick, which is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people that have occupied this island for over 12,000 years. And we honor the treaties of peace and friendship, which recognize Mi'kmaq rights and established an ongoing relationship between nations. So I'll start by sharing my screen. And just get to full screen mode. So as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at the social business canvas model part two. So just showing here, we have the full social business canvas, and we talked about how this is a great visual tool that is a living document where you and your team can have everything around your social enterprise located in one place that makes for easy visualization. And it's both an internal and an external tool. So it's something that you can use and your team can use to map out your social enterprise, as well as you can share it with key stakeholders and funders who are looking for information on your social enterprise. So in the last, in part one, we covered customer relationships, customers, your value proposition, and revenue and benefits. So those are grayed out right now. And today we are going to look at key activities, key resources, key partners, channels, and expenditures and costs. So the example that we saw from Andy Horsnall back in October was the full social business canvas that used this construction social enterprise as an example, where we both look at the enterprise piece of the social enterprise, which is the paying customers and the value proposition that you offer them and how you deliver on the product or service that the enterprise offers, as well as highlights all of the social value and social activities and social partners. So there's always two pieces to your social enterprise, both the financial and enterprising activities, as well as the social benefit and value that you bring. So in each section, you can break out those two pieces. So today we're going to focus on the key activities of your social enterprise. So these are the things that are essential to bringing that value proposition to your customers.
And then that becomes
to your customers, your product or service to your customers. So you're going to just look at your value proposition and see what activities are required to achieve that. And so you're going to ignore your bookkeeping, staff meetings, et cetera, as those are activities that, although required, aren't part of the key deliverable on your value proposition. So we're going to consider three types of key activities. You have your production activities, which is something where you'll be making something. That could be something that's physical or virtual. As well, you could also have an activity that's a problem-solving activity, and that could be a social enterprise that's involved in consulting or creating reports. Or as well, you could have a network or a platform, and in that activity, you're creating an environment for other things to happen. So you might have a rental space that's being used by entrepreneurs or artists or performers, and then that would be a platform space. You really need to consider what activity you're involved in and how this is going to affect your model. So there's different things to consider, such as when you're looking at a production activity, that could be have some consistency and stability over time. So you could be producing the same product over time, and then you could have a very repeatable process for doing that. Whereas problem-solving activity may be more customized, depending
Amia,
Sorry to stop you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
There's an echo when you're talking.
Okay.
And so the reason is there's a thing that says Community Sector Network of PEI, and then it's echoing everything that you're saying. So either you or Christine have to mute that additional.
I've
There
muted
you
it
go.
now. Is that
Now
better?
it's muted.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I could hear it, and I wasn't sure if anyone else could hear it. So I was like, I'm just going to continue on.
No, all good. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexia. So I apologize for that. I am not sure how that second window got opened. So hopefully that won't impact too much of what I said. So I'll just repeat a few things from this slide. So you can have 3 key activities in your social enterprise. You could be involved in production. So that's the creation of something that's either physical or virtual. You could have a problem-solving activity where you're involved in consulting one-on-one with clients or developing reports, or as well having a network or a platform where you're creating an environment for other people to make things happen. And so you just want to look at how this affects your overall business model. So production of something tends to be more consistent and stable and repeatable over time. So that's really a defined process. So whereas a problem-solving activity, you might have unique client needs, and you might have to do more customization, and that could involve some new learning. So you need to consider how these activities will overall impact the business model and how you deliver on your value proposition. So when you're looking at your key activities, you're going to look at all the other sections in the business canvas to see what you need to deliver on those. So you'll be looking at things like your channels. So how are you going to get that product or service to your end user? And you want to make sure that you identify the activities
webinar thing
that are required for
5 minutes for a phone call. Is that okay?
Oh yeah,
Just my doctor.
yeah, for sure.
Okay, I just wanted to let you know.
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
That are required to deliver on that value proposition. So, and then you just filter out all the other things that are essential to run the business but aren't key to your value proposition. Sorry, I just didn't go back to full screen after I did the muting of that second channel that was open. So another part of our social business canvas is our key resources. And then these can be divided into 4 different groupings. So these are both all physical resources. So that's your space, buildings, equipment, etc. Your human capital, which is your team and all of their unique skill sets that they bring to the organization. And then included in that team is your staff and your contractors. An important piece of this is that it's also the connections that your team has made to other stakeholders. So those relationships that they've developed over time are part of that human capital. And often in nonprofit organizations, there's members of the team that are doing a variety of tasks and many different types of jobs. So it's not as necessarily as linear as in the for-profit sector. So you want to make sure that you have good succession planning, not just for if somebody leaves their job, but also if somebody has to take a parental leave or is on an extended sick leave, that you are able to fill those gaps. So working on making sure you understand what each member of the team is responsible for and what unique skill sets they have so that you can continue to build on that human capital, even in the event that somebody moves into a different position. And then our other resources are our financial capital, and that can be our operating funds and what types of investments we have. Also, if you're able to take on any debt financing to get your social enterprise off the ground, that could contribute to that capital. And then finally, another key resource is any intellectual property that you develop, whether it's a trademark, a trade secret, patent or copyright, and also any proprietary business practices. And when it comes to those business practices, like I mentioned with human capital, it's really critical that you start to write things down in a way that you can pass on to other people or scale if necessary. So my own experience of starting a small business, a lot of things will live in the founder's head, so to speak, for a period of time. And then when you start to hire staff that are going to need to access that information, you need to really create systems around keeping those things organized so that you can pass that information on easily and make it easy for someone who doesn't know very much about the business to just come in and be able to get their arms around what you're doing. So there's a big transition from your early founding stage into your scaling stage, where you sort of formalize a lot of your business practices. And these key resources, your human, intellectual, financial, and physical resources, will be dependent on whether you are in a production related activity versus a problem solving activity. So key resources for production related activities might be more in terms of your physical resources, because you'll need space to produce and equipment to produce. Whereas if you're in a problem solving space where you're doing more service based offerings, then a lot of your resources might be more human resources in terms of client outreach and client meetings and support, and then the intellectual property around what you're developing to give to your customers. So another key part of our social business canvas is our partnerships. So as you begin your social enterprise, it's very unlikely that you'll be able to do all of the things under that umbrella on your own in the beginning, or even going forward. You like to take on a sort of specialization of labor approach, where if there's already somebody doing something very well, then you want to create a relationship with them that can be mutually beneficial. So you can form strategic alliances with other organizations or companies where you take on a project while remaining independent. So you could do a different type of franchising or licensing. In some circumstances, you can develop they call it co-opetition. So a relationship that might have initially been a competition, but then there's a mutual benefit for both parties that can lead to a positive outcome. And sort of the most widely known example of this in the private sector now is what happened in the COVID-19 pandemic, where both BioNTech and Moderna and Pfizer had different technologies that were going to contribute to the development of the most of the very badly needed COVID-19 vaccine. But neither company on their own was going to be able to get to that end goal in the time that was required. So through a cooperative partnership based just on this one project, Pfizer and BioNTech, in a very unique relationship for that pharmaceutical industry, agreed to collaborate on this vaccine and share some of their IP so that we could get to that end goal faster. So that was beneficial to both of them in terms of furthering their financial reward, as well as the technology that they were able to develop in partnership, and then obviously the global benefit of getting probably the fastest vaccine ever made for humans out in a time of a global pandemic. So there's other types of key partnerships that we can consider. So there's a joint venture relationship. So this is just when you collaborate on a specific project and you share specific resources. So it's different than a partnership where you're going to be engaged in a relationship where the businesses are cooperating on multiple projects and multiple avenues. There would be more of a well-defined set of goals around sharing knowledge around this specific project. And then a very critical relationship is any type of buyer-supplier relationship. So if you have a key ingredient for your product, then you want to make sure that you develop a good relationship with your supplier so that you can ensure that there will be a constant flow of that critical item to you so that you don't ever have to fall behind in production due to lack of inputs. And over time, so if you're doing sort of a one-off buy, then maybe that relationship doesn't develop further. But in my own business, that I've been running for about 8 years, I have critical supplier relationships now that are able to procure key ingredients for us that I can't really access anywhere else. And so maintaining those relationships is really key, especially if they're coming from other countries. So I'm having to do a lot of importing through customs, and any relationship you develop with a supplier where you're having to involve importing, it's really good if that relationship's really solid. They can help you handle that brokerage but importing into the country. So that can be a barrier sometimes if you don't have a good relationship with your supplier and your customs broker. And then of course, if you're you have your own loyalty to your suppliers. So over time, they will give you different discounts and bulk discounts, and also make you aware of anything new that they're going to be bringing to the market that might benefit your business. So that's a critical partnership as well. So the motivations for having partnerships in a social enterprise helps you to in your impact goals. So we're always in the nonprofit sector looking to maximize our impact, and often with not as many resources as for-profit businesses. So by creating these partnerships, we can move to better economies of scale and increase our relationship to impact. So when you're going through your list of your partners, you can identify who you're currently working with, who else you might like to be working with, what organizations could bring you new customers, what's the mutual benefit to these partners, what are you able to provide to them, how deep is this relationship, and what can you provide your stakeholders to those partners as well. So a lot of these will be mutually beneficial cooperation type relationships, whether they're partnerships long-term involving both businesses, partnerships on a project, or a supplier relationship. So another important part of the canvas are our channels. And this is basically how we are going to communicate, sell, and distribute the products or the services to the customers and beneficiaries in the broader audience. So it will significantly influence the reach and awareness of the social enterprise. So we want to be very deliberate when we're choosing these channels. And the better your channels are, the more successful you're going to be when you're going to connect with your target market. And we talked about target market in the first piece as the area of the market demographic that you're going to go after as your first initial target. So the people that you want to adopt your product or service early on, you want to figure out where those people live and breathe and how you're going to reach them, either through social media, word of mouth, newsletter, all of the above, and also making sure that you're in the right social media environment for your product or service. So there's 4 types of channels that we can think about when we're looking to reach customers. So you can have your physical channel. So this would be if you have a brick and mortar store, maybe you're at trade shows, maybe you're at events where customers can find you and try out your product or service. You can have digital channels. So that's your internet store where you're marketing directly from your website. And so then there's 2 types of channels that bring your product to a customer. There's what's called a direct channel, which is your organization interacting with the end user, the beneficiary. So this can be really useful because you know who your customers are. You're able to interact with them directly. You'll be able to go through the whole user journey experience with them, right from awareness to consideration, purchase, and then follow up. So that's a really great connection to your customer base. You can also take advantage of what are called indirect channels. So those are intermediaries or that help to sell or distribute your products. So this would be a business to business relationship where you're selling your product or service through another intermediary. And that can be very helpful because those intermediaries will already have customer bases established, and their goal is just to deliver products to those customers. So they will already have a lot of social media and other marketing campaigns going on. So you can leverage those that marketing strategy that they are already have a lot of expertise in and have already developed. But the drawback, unfortunately, is that you often then don't know who your end user is, because these indirect channels are in charge of that final delivery, and they often won't make you aware of those users because that's their those are their customers, technically speaking. So it's a good way to broaden your reach, but then you might not have a lot of information about who your end user is to inform how your product is being received. So in that case, it would be highly recommended that you develop good relationships with your distributors so that they can give you anonymous data about your customers, so they can give you feedback received from the customers without necessarily disclosing who they are, so that you can improve your products. So as I mentioned, there's sort of the process of going through a purchase of either a service or a product. There's this user journey experience, and you want to make sure that you're able to hit all the key points when you're looking at your channel. So the first touch point is awareness. So this is how you inform your potential audience or customer about your organization and what your proposed value proposition is. And this often still is word of mouth. So we do use social media a lot for marketing these days, but I think it can be in some ways still a word of mouth situation, because a lot of people will inform their friends and family through social media about a product or a service or an event, right? So that's, even though it's present on social media, it sort of requires the tagging or forwarding of that information to other people. So it's sort of a combination of a word of mouth and different marketing strategies. And this awareness might take someone, 1, 2, 3 times before they move on to making a decision about whether they're going to evaluate your product or service. So that awareness might not be a single step. It might be many points before they decide to test something out. And then when they move to that evaluation piece, that's when they're going to start looking at the value that your product or service delivers in comparison with others. So that's when they may go to your website, they'll start looking at the features and benefits of your product. If you have any customer reviews, that's when they're going to start doing their more about comparing and contrasting before they move to that final purchase, where they're going to, actually buy the product or service. And then this is going to happen either in a physical store or online or at an event, or through what the indirect or direct channels that I mentioned before. And then you have the delivery piece. So this is how does your product or service eventually reach that end user? And then depending on your business, you want to have some after sales support to provide service after they've made their purchase. So this is where you can have customer feedback forms, review potential, and there's often a sort of a bit of a grab for a customer to fill out those surveys by, offering them a discount, or, a referral to a friend or a family for a discount. So you can offer that so that you can encourage them to deliver their feedback to you. So it's just important that you make sure that when you're thinking about your channels, that it doesn't end at the purchase. You also have to do the delivery and then the follow-up support. And I would say particularly in the more customization project service delivery, you want to be offering a lot of support after, so that people are satisfied with the outcome of those more customizable projects. So the last piece of the social business canvas that we're going to cover today is cost structure. And this is really important to keep in mind because it's going to dictate your break-even point and how much you're going to need to charge for your product or service in order to cover your expenses. So there's two different types of costs that we can sort our expenses into. One is the fixed costs and the other is the variable costs. And then from those two cost basis, we'll develop an overall cost structure. So our fixed costs are our operating and human resources costs. So this is costs that you're going to have to pay regardless of what your level of sales of your goods and services are. So these would be your rent or your lease, your salaries and benefits, your insurance, etc. So these are, you're going to pay them every month, whether you sell, 100 widgets or 1,000,000 widgets or 0 widgets. So you really want to make sure that you're able to cover these fixed costs, because if you can't make payments on those things, then you can't run your business. So you want to make sure that you're able to hit these targets. And then your variable costs are all the things that are going to fluctuate depending on how much sales you're doing. So these would be your raw material inputs, your manufacturing costs, and how much it costs to ship things. And so this would be variable depending on what your sales volume is. And this is often called on your accounting spreadsheet, your COGS, your costs of goods sold. So you're looking a bit further into these two different types of costs. You have your operating costs. So these are your ongoing expenses running your day-to-day operations. So this is marketing and advertising, R&D, customer support. And so these can be variable. They're not directly tied to your cost of goods sold because they're not actually inputs needed to manufacture your product or deliver on your service, but they're still necessary, but they're not fixed like rent or salary. So you do have some flexibility in how much you want to spend in marketing and advertising and R&D. So these would be variable costs that you develop a budget for and determine where you're sort of going to get the most bang for your buck. And definitely in times of high cash flow, you'd have more money to spend in these areas, so you could start to expand or grow your business. And then in other times where things can be a bit tighter, these would be areas that companies would be looking to make their first cuts to because they're not fixed. So this would require some planning stages where you're at with your social enterprise, and also important to consider whether or not any of your activities are seasonal. So there might be a period of the year where you can reduce some of these variable operating costs, and then other periods of the year where you want to make sure you're investing a lot in marketing and advertising. For example, if you're in tourism, then the months leading into the tourism season would be critical for your marketing and advertising campaigns. And then another cost is a little bit harder to get your arms around sometimes, but it's important to consider your customer acquisition costs. So this is how much money you need to spend to get a new customer. So you could see how much money you spent in a year, for example, on a certain marketing campaign, and then see how many new customers you were able to acquire, and then attribute that depending on if you were able to track how they found you, if it was directly through that marketing campaign, and then you could calculate out how much it cost you to acquire each customer through that campaign, and whether that was worth it or not. So I have a friend who runs a distillery in Calgary, and he's done a series of different events and pop-ups and offered discounts on certain products at certain times of year. And through that, he gathered a large amount of data about how many customers he was able to attract based on what the offers were. And then over time, he's really refined what types of pop-ups he runs and what types of marketing campaigns he runs, because some he found were just far too expensive for how many customers he was able to attract. So that's important to consider as well. And it also gives you a really good indication of the importance of, once you have an established customer, to maintain that relationship. It always costs more to get the investment to get a new customer is always going to be more than it is once you already have an established relationship with a customer. So making sure that you are able to deliver on your value proposition for your customers is key to retention. So that's an important thing to consider as well. And then there's a series of non-operating costs that'll show up in your accounting spreadsheet, which you have to be aware of just so you don't get caught off guard. So these can be loan repayments. If you're going to move your business, there'll be a certain cost to relocate. If you're operating in different international markets, and there'll be a currency exchange that you need to worry about. And then if you have a one-off expense or an unusual cost, you just want to make sure that you're tracking those as well. And then based on this cost structure in combination with the revenue piece on the social business canvas, you can start to think about a price point for your product or service, with the goal being whatever what your profit goal is. You want to make sure that you're able to cover all these costs and then have whatever your profit goal is left over for the social impact piece of where that money is going to be reinvested into your organization. So when you're considering your fixed costs and your variable costs, this will result in what's known as a hybrid cost structure. So most businesses have this cost structure just because that's the nature of the beast. You're going to have some fixed costs and some variable costs, and you can balance the benefits of these with the fixed costs offer a lot of stability and predictability. So you can see ahead for, a whole fiscal year, how much those fixed costs are going to be and start planning accordingly for that. And then around variable costs, there's a lot of flexibility around that, which can have advantages and disadvantages. So your fixed costs give you a good idea about your cost control, how to manage your cash flow. And then the disadvantages are you could have increased overhead costs. You might not to be as efficient. You'll have a less straightforward cost structure as a result of the variable costs. So there's advantages and disadvantages to both fixed costs and variable costs. So you have to consider all of those things when you're putting together your cost structure. And so that is the end of today's webinar, and it concludes our deeper dive into the social business canvas. And then in January, we'll look at taking some of the individual pieces of the social business canvas and looking at how you can then develop a business plan that can be used both internally so that your team knows the full business plan, as well as externally for stakeholders, partnerships, investors, funders, etc. So I will stop sharing my screen now and see if there's any questions. Anyone? Let's see if there's any. Oh, there's someone wrote in the chat. Okay, I solved that problem.
Thank you, Mayor. That was an excellent presentation, and certainly a lot to review and think about. So if we don't have any questions, I will tell you that this recording will be available later today on YouTube, our YouTube channel, and I'll be sending the link out to everybody. So I also encourage you, while you're there, to subscribe to our channel. It's pretty new, but we've got quite a bit of content on there already. So as Amira mentioned, our next webinar for this series is Wednesday, January 8th, and it's Canvas to Plan. And the registration is now open on Eventbrite as well. And I'll pop that link into my email as well. Anything else to add, Amir?
No, I don't think I have anything else to add, except to say that as we head into the holidays, I hope that everybody is able to wrap things up and enjoy some, relaxing time with family and friends and good food. And then we'll be back in the new year to continue.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your day to join us. Have a great day.
Okay, bye-bye.